he just went low. He's in his head. He's in his head. He's open. His head wide open. Cracked open in the face.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Mario Man 100 back again with another episode of How's My Team. We've got a lot to talk about. Obviously, we'll talk about more on the World Cup. We obviously got State of Origin Game 3, the decider of the series between New South Wales Blues and the Queensland Maroons. So obviously last game for that series for the year to see if New South Wales or Queensland will get up. We obviously got the Titans up against Melbourne in Melbourne. We've got the Giants back at home at NG Stadium, obviously against Geelong Cats after a fantastic win against the Fremantle Dockers last week in Canberra. We've also got the Cubs obviously against the Baltimore Orioles and the Cincinnati Reds in two series away from Wrigley Field. So lots to talk about, plenty to talk about, obviously not too much in terms of Liverpool and in terms of the Wanderers, but in terms of that, there's a whole bunch going on. So, and then obviously the Titans women's team, obviously playing the Bulldogs as well on Saturday, which I almost forgot. So, yeah, plenty to talk about throughout this. So let's get started with the episode. Alright, first order of business, Friday afternoon when I'm recording this part, but obviously we've got to talk about State of Origin, Game 3, the decider, obviously 1-1 with obviously New South Wales winning Game 1 and the Maroons winning convincingly in Game 2. Obviously the Blues winning very, very close game in Game 1. Game 3, obviously at Suncorp Stadium on Wednesday, just gone. Haven't been able to record since the time that the game happened. Obviously, series was in the balance. Whoever won this game obviously won the series. And it ended up being the Blues, the mighty Blues, 30 points to 12, ended up being the final score. And I know that some people will have some contentious calls when it comes down to this game, and we'll get to one of those in a little bit. But ultimately, I will say, obviously, New South Wales played a lot better in the game. We'll say that the Maroons, even just looking at the stats, the Maroons completion rate 70% compared to 86% for the Blues, 54% to 46% in the favour of the Blues in terms of possession. Overall, talking about kick defusal, was not great for us, 33%, despite winning by a decent chunk by 18 points. It's pretty crazy that our kick defusal is 33%. Theirs is obviously 67%. But effective tackles, 90% compared to 84%. One intercept, obviously, but 50 missed tackles in terms of the Maroons compared to 29 for the Blues. And obviously the errors, penalties and that, 13 errors compared to 11 in the favour of the Maroons. So 13 errors from the Maroons, 11 from New South Wales. Penalties conceded 5-3 in the favour of New South Wales. I think that's obviously New South Wales giving away 5 penalties to 3. 4 ruck infringements to 3 in the favour of Maroons. They've given away more ruck infringements in the game. I think that's how it is. I'm not sure if it's giving or have been given. And 2 on reports compared to 1 in the favour of the Maroons, in that obviously 2 head injury assessments. It's funny, it says it's 2, but I guess that's going against the Maroons compared to, but even then, HIAs, there was quite a few in the game. There was quite a few players that obviously were in the game But overall, New South Wales came out firing a lot better than the Maroons did, and all credit where credit is due to obviously a great game in that. Yes, obviously there's some contentious calls in the game in particular, but again, most of the games in the Origin series do have those, at least one big one, pretty much every series. Obviously, a couple of years ago, obviously it's Joseph Swahili. Earlier this year, it looked like it was going to be obviously the Caleb Ponga sin bin, and ultimately it still feels like that's probably the most contentious call of the series so far. It's one of those things where there's so many things that have happened when it comes down to this series. But obviously the Blues end up winning, and they pretty much led from the front. They didn't let go of the lead at all during the game. It's pretty even very early in the first half. Nathan Cleary scored first in the 14th minute and also ended up converting it in the 15th minute. Also scored again in the 26th minute, got put through a gap. He ended up scoring and converted as well, make it 12-0. Then very late in the piece, we got Cam Murray in at the 29th minute. Was converted, made it 18-0, and then Hamaso Tabuai Fido ended up scoring in the 34th minute, and was not converted to make it the halftime score, which made it 18-4. So pretty good result to start off with. Then Selwyn Cobbo ended up scoring in the 48th minute, which brought it back a few points, obviously 18-8 at that point in time. Obviously Sam Walker at this point in time, I think had already been just a little bit after this, actually was hit and got hit by a really good tackle, we'll admit, but he went off for a HIA, a head injury assessment, because he was on the ground for a bit. There was quite a few players down and out for this game in particular. Around this time, just before half time, James Tedesco got hit by an absolutely fantastic tackle, one thing I will say, but he did get hit high, and he went off for a HIA, and ended up being Category 1, so he's going to be stand down for the next game at least, for the Roosters, if not the game after as well, unless they're on the bye, then maybe that covers that 14-day period. But he's going to be out this weekend, obviously, against the Eels. The Roosters play the Eels this weekend on Saturday, so he'll be out for that game in particular. There was a few head injury assessments. Sam Walker was another one, but he did eventually go back on. He was a Category 2. Jack Bostock was another one on debut. He went off as well. And I think he had a Cat 2 initially, and then obviously got ruled out as well. So we had a few players come in from the team to get in. Kohler was one of them. He went in for Teddy off that HIA, which did get on report. Obviously didn't get a sin bin or anything like that. I think Nikora did hit him with a little bit with the shoulder, but not like, obviously he did brace. So I guess the penalty did suffice for that. But obviously Kohler went into the fullback role, and then Ethan Strange ended up going on after Jack Bostock went out. Around the time that Sam Walker went off, Reece Walsh ended up going on the field, which I think for Queensland that kind of made sense at that point in time. Then we had the contentious call to come after that, with Bradman Best in the 56th minute ended up scoring, though it did look like it hit the hands of Jack Bostock in the lead-up play when it would come off to a kick, went across field, went to his wing. It did look like it hit, I believe Jojo Fafita was on that wing. I think it hit him first, and possibly went backwards and then hit Jack Bostock and then went forwards. I'm not sure. But again, in saying that, like a lot of Queenslanders, with the fact that this game is lost, kind of put that. It's like, oh well, that's the game. That's let's call it. Literally, basically gave the game to the New South Wales. Not the fact of obviously the 3 tries in the first half from the sloppy defense and sloppy errors from Queensland. And even then, it's not the last try that we actually did score in the game either. Because Jojo Fafita ended up scoring the 63rd minute. They also almost scored another one off Robert Toya, but one of the players that was involved in the lead-up play ended up playing offside. So he was called offside from that. Foot in front, so some people will say Max Plath, Max Plath, just had I believe it was his left foot in front of the kicker of Cam Munster, I believe, or I think it actually might have been Sam Walker that did the kick. He did the majority of the kicking. Cam Munster did do some kicking in the game, but Sam Walker ended up kicking the most. But he was just in front, ended up Robert Toya ended up coming down with it. But he did get involved with the play. He didn't actually touch the ball, but he got relatively close to it. And in fact, he actually pulls out of it because it looks like Robert Toya actually calls for it, which I looking at it live was like, oh, that's great. Robert Toya's called that first, and they've made sure they haven't bundled it. But obviously was overturned in the bunker to be offside, and obviously didn't see the rest of it. In the fact that obviously if you're offside off a kick, can't be within 10 metres of the ball or the play. So they could have got a try back, and some people say, oh, well, look at that, like that's a call that could have went either way. That's a 50-50 call that didn't go in the favour of the Maroons. But in saying that, very early on, in fact, literally before Nathan Cleary's first try in the 14th minute, Bostock ended up getting we got a break and got a few passes off that were in chain. And Bradman Best ended up passing it in the vicinity of Jack Bostock when it was basically, I think it was a 3-on-2. Had a big gap in front of him, and he just, the pass was relatively alright, wasn't straight at the chest, it was a little bit out, and obviously Jack Bostock did end up dropping the ball, but that is obviously a try for New South Wales that even if you take the Bradman Best try off, it's like we would have still probably scored that one if we ended up holding onto the ball. So we almost got one back because of that. Not necessarily, obviously, the refs giving us one back, but obviously it come out afterwards that the bunker had gotten the call wrong because obviously it went up as a try, and obviously they would have had to look at it to see if they could overturn it, whether it was a try or not. And then obviously in the 80th minute, I should say very late in the game, we ended up getting a penalty goal in front, which gave us 2 points in the 70th minute, which kind of stemmed the flow. This was a little bit just after the Robert Toya miss and disallowed try, so to get us back in front, because I think at that point it was obviously 24-8, and obviously they were coming at us, and obviously yes, that disallowed try did go that, but we had Queensland had a lot of momentum at that point in time, and then obviously we got a penalty in front, not too far away from the post, a little bit wide of the post on the right side, and Nathan Cleary kicked a penalty goal in the 70th minute to put us ahead by more than that 2 converted try points at that point in time. Which made it 14 in front, and then obviously on the hooter, Hudson Young ended up scoring off a break and a fantastic pass, but ultimately, which made obviously the final score of 30 points to 12. Obviously that means that out of the Origin deciders, the last 2 Origin deciders in Suncorp have gone to the Blues. In saying that previously, obviously before that, one of the only ones that we did have this millennium and this century was obviously the one in 2005. That's the only one that really comes to mind out of the last couple of decades. So obviously going back to back, because obviously Game 3 was played in New South Wales last year, which obviously Queensland ended up winning. But in saying that, obviously, with that, New South Wales have obviously won the series. They won the series 2-1. They won, obviously, Game 3. Nathan Cleary ended up getting the Wally Lewis medal. Got man of the match in this game. Obviously, considering he got man of the match in Game 1 as well, makes sense that he was a Wally Lewis medalist. Future, obviously, NRL immortal at this point, Nathan Cleary, because he's pretty much got everything in his career that he could possibly get. He's obviously got a Dally M, he's obviously got a Wally Lewis medal, he's won premierships, he's won 4. He's won the World Cup, Rugby League World Cup, I should say. He's gotten so many accolades in terms of his team, in terms of his state, in terms of his country. Obviously, he's getting a decider win, obviously in a State of Origin series, getting a series win as well, and then obviously getting a Wally Lewis medal. That was pretty much like the only things that really he hadn't got. And obviously it's the top point scorer for New South Wales now, all time, and is the highest scoring, or at least tied highest scoring in an Origin decider with Jonathan Thurston with 18 points to his name. So so great result from Nathan Cleary. Obviously he stood up. A lot of people stood up as well during this game. Obviously, quite a few were under pressure. Obviously, Bradman Best coming in, I thought was a great pick. And obviously, that, as I said, weeks ago, after Game 2, I said exactly that. I said that if Bradman Best is good to play, he should play, and he gets picked, and then obviously plays relatively out of his skin. So it's just one of those things where, obviously New South Wales ended up winning. This series went either way, but obviously the errors for the Maroons really costed them dearly, and obviously they ended up losing the series because of that. And obviously the Origin Shield now goes back down to New South Wales for another year. So so ultimately looking forward to the series in the future, and obviously getting back to regular football, obviously with the Titans now. Tino didn't look too bad in the game, and obviously Jojo didn't play absolutely out of his skin, but obviously got a try again on Wednesday night. So congrats to him, and I think both of those players will be backing up from their efforts in Origin 3 at the moment. I'm not sure exactly just yet, because obviously we haven't got a full list on these players are back and with the team, and obviously they're fine. Obviously we won't get late mail until before the game on Sunday, but as far as I know right now they're right. There's been no real big injuries. Obviously, as I said, Tedesco is probably one of the only ones, in the fact that he's obviously got a Category 1 concussion, so obviously in terms of the protocols he can't actually play. But a lot of the rest of the players are relatively okay. I think that Sam Walker, is also out, and there's another player out. I think Robson was also out for the Roosters this week as well. So, but maybe they're on the extended bench. I'm not 100% sure yet. But at least Tedesco, at least I know, is out completely from the game on the weekend. So, looking forward obviously Sunday to see how the Titans do. We'll see what Melbourne's side end up putting out on the field, because who knows whether they'll have some of their stars missing out and taking a break, because obviously this is a game that they could have a couple of people rested possibly, but obviously against the Titans. But again, in saying that, they want to make up some points, they want to make up some ground to get into the top 8. So who knows at this point. But obviously New South Wales with a win, and they win the State of Origin series for 2026. Alright, Monday morning, and I'm going to go most of the rest of the segments of the video with this on. I'm just going to milk wearing the Blues cap pretty much the entire time. Obviously there'll be one segment where I won't be, because obviously they recorded that before actually talking about State of Origin. And that obviously will be the Cubs segment against the Orioles, because they recorded that around about the same time. But in saying that, obviously we'll get to that. in the video. Obviously, I've recorded it already. But Monday morning, I should have recorded a bunch of these yesterday, but I was very lazy, procrastinated quite a bit. So we'll talk about the Titans women up against the Bulldogs, obviously in Sydney, round 2 after a pretty crappy loss to the Roosters. But again, in saying that, Sydney Roosters and the NRLW, it's not really a surprise that we did lose. It's just some of the calls that obviously went against us in that game, especially the sin bin. Don't know what the fuck happened there. But in saying that, obviously round 2 in Sydney this time, obviously playing against the Bulldogs last year. Obviously, last season we made history with them, obviously as the only game in the NRLW that has gone to an actual draw and split points. But it wasn't that result this time. It was 36 points to 10 win for the Titans. Titans beating them by 26 points. So obviously during the game, Jamie Chapman ended up scoring her first try in the 7th minute. Was converted by Lauren Brown. Then Evania Osako, I believe she might be related to Osako from the Dolphins. I'm not 100% sure, but I think she's from the same family. She scored in the 14th minute, wasn't converted. Jamie Chapman ended up scoring her second try of the game in the 20th minute, was converted by Lauren Brown in the 21st. Then the Bulldogs, so at halftime, it was 16-0. So a great result for the Titans there. So obviously that means that, yes, they scored 20 points in the second half, which was great. Kept them scoreless pretty much for the first half of footy. The Bulldogs, they scored first in the 38th minute from Hope Millard, and that was converted by Taylor Preston. Then Jamie Chapman went in for her third try of the game, obviously scoring a hat-trick in the 46th minute, converted by Lauren Brown. And then after that, after that, the Bulldogs scored again in the 52nd minute, wasn't converted, which made it, obviously they got their majority of their points, the 10 points that they needed. Got pretty close, obviously, in that. Obviously, it would have been 22-10 at that point in time, so 12 points in front. So it would have been a little bit nervous, especially with the fact that obviously it was in the 52nd minute, had 18 minutes to run down 2 converted tries. Tegan Levi in the 57th minute said nope to that and scored a try relatively close under the post. Lauren Brown ended up converting. Then 3 minutes later in the 60th minute, Georgia Gray ended up going over. And then obviously for her 4th try in the 64th minute, Jamie Chapman ended up scoring, which made it 36-10, the final scoreline. And Jamie Chapman has joined, I think, 5 or 6 players in the NRLW history to score 4 tries during a game. Obviously, is the only Titan to ever do that so far. But yeah, great result, obviously, from the Titans women's team. Pretty overall great performance from them. Keep doing that. I don't know why it keeps going to round 11 when I'm going through that, but I guess considering how many rounds we've gone through in the men's, it tries to compensate for that. In terms of possession, it was more so in the possession of the Titans, 58% to 42%. 83% completion rate compared to 66% for the Bulldogs. So there's probably a few errors from the Bulldogs. Kick defusal 83% to 69%. Defense effective tackle percentage 93% in the Titans' favour to 84%. 36 missed tackles for the Bulldogs, 13 for the Titans, and 10 ineffective tackles for the Bulldogs and 4 for the Titans. 14 errors to 7 in the favour of the Bulldogs. Bulldogs getting 14. Obviously conceding penalties, 6 in terms of the Titans, 5 in terms of the Bulldogs. 4 players on report for the Dogs as well. So again, the completion rate probably was the thing that kind of hurt the Bulldogs. And again, in saying that, yes, we scored 36 points in this game, but I think a lot of it was the defense as well, especially early on in the game when there was not really too many scores during the game. Because I will say this for the Titans men's game, and we'll get to that in a second. But both the defenses in terms of the Titans women's team and the Titans men's team, it's definitely improved. Obviously, the Titans women's team, they've had a really good defense pretty decently since they obviously the season where they went to the grand final and lost to Newcastle. It's one of those things where that's something that I think that Karen Murphy is instilled in the players in the team over the last few years. I think there's only been one season where we haven't done relatively well in terms of defense, but every other time we've done relatively well. And again, we did decently well against the Sydney Roosters last week. But in saying that, obviously a lot of calls did go against us as well. But in saying that, we did make a lot of errors in round one again, which wasn't ideal, which obviously led to a lot of the Roosters' points over the weekend, so over that particular game. So it wasn't great in terms of that. Other results, Broncos ended up winning 22-16. They scored pretty much almost on full time as well, which didn't help the Sharks. 30 points to 18 in the earlier game before the Titans game for the Tigers over the Cowboys. And then the Roosters narrowly avoided defeat, 12 points to 10 against the Newcastle Knights. Though in saying that, I will say there was a few calls that did go against Newcastle in that game as well. So, it wasn't an ideal situation, and realistically it feels like the Roosters only just won just for the sake of winning. Raiders 42-16 at home against the Warriors, so fantastic result for them. They're up and up. And the Dragons end up getting the first win of the season, 22 points to 8 over the Eels as well. So in terms of the Women's Premiership ladder, it goes like this. Obviously 2 games in, so it's not really too much of a change, and like a lot of the chopping and changing will happen in the next couple of weeks. Brisbane on top with 4 points. Then Canberra also in second position, also on 4 points. All these teams in the top 4 are all on 4 points. Sydney Roosters in third, and the West Tigers in fourth position. Obviously, in terms of that points difference there, 52 obviously to the Broncos, 42 to the Raiders, 26 for the Roosters, and 24 for the Tigers. Fifth position, Newcastle Knights, followed by the Gold Coast. The Gold Coast moved from second last to sixth position. Dragons in seventh, Warriors in eighth, and they're all on 2 points there. It's just obviously the for and against there is the difference there. Obviously plus 12 for Newcastle, plus 2 obviously for the Titans, minus 2 for the Dragons, and minus 4 for the Warriors. Obviously Warriors getting a big win in the first round. 9th is Cronulla, 10th is Parramatta, 11th is the Bulldogs, and obviously in last position is the North Queensland Cowboys / Cowgirls. So it's one of those things. Obviously, it's going to be big in terms of games. Obviously, the competition will chop and change, but I feel like it'll still be obviously it'll be a big test for the Raiders this week. I just switched over, and on Saturday, it's the Raiders versus the Roosters in the first game on Saturday. So that's going to be crucial for the Raiders to see if that top 2 Broncos and obviously the Roosters obviously being in third position right now, but obviously those 2 teams, whether their domination will actually be a little bit overlooked, and a lot of the other competition teams will be better. I don't know, but this will be a big test, obviously, for Canberra. Obviously, playing at home is probably a bonus as well, but against a really good Roosters side, who knows? Warriors versus Cowboys in Auckland. That's going to be great for New Zealand there. Bulldogs versus Sharks at a core. Obviously, 2 teams that haven't won yet. Titans and the Eels. Obviously, the Titans playing at home, and I believe that game in particular, might be a a doubleheader, possibly. Because I think we might be playing Sunday, the men might be playing Sunday. Broncos versus Tigers, so another top four clash. So the four teams in the top four will actually be battling each other over the next round, which is great in terms of that. And then Newcastle versus the Dragons as well. I will look at the premiership table. No, it is around 20. Let me have a look. Scroll down to Sunday. Yes, it's Sunday at 2 against the Seagulls. So, yeah, it will be a doubleheader for the women and the men in that particular week, this week coming up. So, it's going to be great. We'll see what happens with the Eels, because obviously it is a clash that we have been relatively good at in recent history. Obviously, I think the last encounter we did lose to the Eels, but we'll see what happens with that. But obviously, good result, 36 points to 10 over the Bulldogs in the round 2 clash for the Titans women's team. And to go from the high of the Titans women's team to a kind of a low for the Titans men's team, they did lose again. They were in Melbourne up against the Melbourne Storm. And once again, around Origin season, the Storm just pick up the win in the last couple of minutes. 22 points to 18 was the Storm over the Titans. And I'm a little bit heartbroken by that, because, again, it is a situation where, yes, Melbourne had some of their players out for this game, but this is a game, again, it's one of those things where, again, we've lost right on the hooter, and we've put the pressure on Melbourne. It's a game, again, that's gone begging, in 2 points, 2 competition points that's gone begging. And in fact, that's actually 4 games this year that we've done that in. Obviously, in the Dolphins game earlier in the year, obviously we bottled that. We bottled against the Manly Seagulls, obviously, in Manly. It's one of those things where that was something that I feel like we could have won that game as well. They lost, obviously, by 2 points. Then, obviously, against the Tigers, where we were ahead by at least 12 or 14 points there, and obviously ended up losing that game. Obviously, the last game at Leichhardt, yes, but in saying that, we didn't do ourselves any favours at all. And then, obviously, this game as well, which doesn't help things either. But again, it just seems like every time we play against the Melbourne Storm around Origin season, I think it's only been once in the last 4 encounters where they've beaten us by over 10 points or so. So it's really, really, really strange. But we'll get to the game. Obviously, it was pretty even for the majority of the first 10-15 minutes or so. Will Warbrick ended up scoring in the 12th minute. The defense moved up. Obviously, Jerome Hughes ended up seeing that, kicked straight to that spot over in the wing, and Warbrick goes over. Mo Foaweka ended up scoring, I think, one of his first tries of the year. I don't know if it is his first try. I think it might be his second or third, but he hasn't scored many this year. Went over in the 17th minute. Both of those tries were converted, obviously, by Nick Meaney and by Jaden Campbell. Jack Howarth in the 29th minute ended up scoring, and obviously was converted by Nick Meaney as well, which made the halftime score 12-6. So we're down by 6 at halftime, which wasn't necessarily too bad. We did have our opportunities to score some more tries in the first half. One where AJ did step over on the sideline. I think it was a couple of minutes before halftime, and there was another opportunity of a drop ball as well in the lead up to a try. About probably 5-10 minutes before that. I think it was not too far after the Jack Howarth try, I believe. So, and watching the highlights for the game. So, pretty unfortunate. We did almost score in the first couple of minutes as well. Just unfortunate that we didn't get over the line. But in speaking on that, the Jack Howarth try, I looked over that over and over again. And I will talk about, obviously, the Cowboys game beforehand. There was a call against Reed Marnie. He ended up scoring a try, then went up to the bunker and was said to be a double movement, even though he was using momentum to get over the line. And obviously when you're watching it in slow motion, yes, it looks like he pushes off. But in saying that, if you're watching it in normal motion, but again, like I said, in slow motion, you're going to see that most of the time with momentum, you're going to see that. Like when someone's rolling, you're going to think, oh, how they got momentum, they must be pushing off. It's like, well, no, if you're watching it in normal play, they're not pushing off at all. If you're watching it slow-mo, every time someone's going to roll, you're going to look at them and they're going to be pushing off. So what the fuck? And it wasn't even held either in that. He obviously just took the momentum over and it was disallowed. Whereas the Jack Howard try, like literally not even an hour later, after obviously the Cowboys game finished, somehow has 4 players on him, is taken from over the try line back into the field of play, obviously stops moving, has his hand on, like the ball carrying arm on the ground with the ball on the ground with 3 or 4 players on him. Obviously he's trying to move and trying to bustle his way over, takes about like 5-6 seconds off the clock, and then somehow gets over the line and it's called a try, not a double movement, even though it's hit the ground at least once in that play. If not, he's been held at least long enough on the clock, and it's not called a double movement, and I don't understand, and we'll get to why that is important in a second. But I think with obviously the scoreline, you probably know what that means. Halftime came, Alec McDonald ended up scoring the 44th minute, which was converted by Nick Meaney. So it ended up being 18 points to 6. Then the Titans were down by 12 points at this point in time. 53rd minute, Jaden Campbell ends up getting an intercept and goes all the way down, scores a try, converts his own try, and then Keanu Kinney ends up scoring a try in the 62nd minute, which again was converted by Jaden Campbell. So it was 18 all at that point in time. So ultimately, with about 17 minutes left on the clock, 17 minutes, the game was tied up. And then the Storm, through Nick Meaney, ended up scoring in the 79th minute. Wasn't converted. We had about like 15-20 seconds left on the clock to go up the other end. And we did make a decent play. Obviously, we got the short kickoff, got in our possession, moved it from the right to the left, and obviously pass went to the ground, travelled quite a bit on the turf. AJ tried to bring it back in because it was going over the sideline, does bring it back in, and obviously Will Warbrick ends up diving on it to finish the game. But obviously that means, yes, the Storm won by 4 points. The Jack Howard try obviously is worth, the try itself is worth 4 points. Also got a conversion, which was 6 points, which means the Titans would have ended up winning this game from just that call alone. Now, again, like I said, there's been other tries that were not actually tries or were disallowed or, had mistakes and errors in them. And ultimately, there is a situation where obviously I hear that Tino did have an error as well, very late in the game, which I don't know whether it was an involvement in terms of the Storm gaining possession, which led to obviously the last try in the last couple of minutes or not. But obviously they didn't show that in the highlights package. So I'm not sure exactly what they're talking about. I'll have to obviously, when the NRL YouTube channel eventually puts up the whole game, I might have to eventually watch that just to see what they're talking about. But in saying that, a double movement call is not called in this game. Gets called in the last game when there is not one, and we lose by 4 points. And again, it's competition points that are gone begging. And I understand there's so many other errors in the game that could have led to other possession and tries and stuff like that. Obviously, in terms of completion rate, 67% for the Titans, 79% for Melbourne, 52% in possession to 48%. in the favour of the Storm. And again, like I said, completion rate, not ideal in terms of the game. Kick defusal was around even. In fact, actually, the Titans actually had the better of that, 64% to 60%. Effective tackles percentage, 85% apiece, so that's great on that. Obviously, 43 missed tackles for the Titans, 31 obviously for Melbourne, 2 intercepts to 1 in the favour of the Titans, and obviously 23 ineffective tackles to 22. 17 errors to 15 in the favour of the Titans, 3 penalties conceded on each team, 3 ruck infringements to Storm's favour, and 1 obviously to the Titans, and 1 inside the 10-metre call for the Titans with the HIA for the Storm. But again, like I said, obviously too many errors, 17 errors, but again, Melbourne were not that far behind in terms of that as well, in terms of that stat. But in looking at all the tries that were available in this game, it gets to a situation where the Titans get dudded by a double movement call that is not called and gets called in the game before when there isn't one against the Cowboys, which is weird because the Cowboys ended up going and losing in that game. They lost by a field goal in Golden Point. So with that loss, we drop back down. We drop back down to second last position in 16th. We'll go over the table. Penrith still on top. Obviously, they had the bye. They're on 32 points. Warriors in second with 28. Sydney Roosters in third, also on 28 points. And rounding out the top 4 is Cronulla on 26 with a 66-0 win over the Dolphins, which was crazy. That was a crazy result. Sydney Roosters ended up beating the Eels, and the Warriors ended up picking up a win as well during that round against the Tigers. They ended up beating the Tigers on Friday night. They belted them. Newcastle dropped to 5th position. They end up losing to the Rabbitohs. Rabbits moved to 6th position. Dolphins moved down to 7th position. So they moved from 3rd to 7th with that loss on 24 points. And North Queensland round out the top 8 with 24 points. Manly dropped to 9th position, obviously with that loss against the North Queensland Cowboys. I was going to say Newcastle. And in saying that, they had their chances. They were ahead by 12 points, I think, at one stage during that game. Melbourne jumped to 10th position with 20 points. Manly on 22, I should say. Bulldogs dropped to 11th position. They got belted by Canberra, so they're also on 20 points. Canberra, speaking on them, they're in 12th position in 18 points. Then the Tigers in 13th, also on 18. Brisbane on 16 in 14th. Para also on 16, we're in 15th position. Gold Coast in 16th with 14, and obviously the Dragons, who also were on the bye this week, on the bottom with 10. So they're 2 points behind. 2 wins behind the Gold Coast right now in terms of the table, and they've had all of their byes. Parramatta in the bottom 4 is the only team that hasn't had their last bye as of yet. So they'll move to at least 18 points minimum during this season. And in fact, actually their bye is actually this week. So they will move to 18 points. But yeah, pretty lackluster performance from the Titans. A game, again, that's gone begging another 2 competition points. Realistically, if we had the 8 points from all the games that we lost really close by like 2 or 4 points at this point in time, with obviously, and even the Tigers game, I should say as well, because we did lose by a decent chunk, we'd be up to 22 points and we'd be running in 10th position right now. We'd be in where Melbourne is at the moment, which is pretty disappointing. And again, like I said, in the Titans women's segment, obviously the Titans women have the Eels. We have the Seagulls at home at Seabus. 2 p.m. on Sunday, so huge game for both clubs. Obviously, the Seagulls are trying to avoid more of a slide, whereas the Titans obviously are trying to get out of the bottom 4, at least out of the bottom 2. Obviously, we're going in as outsiders, even though it's a home game for us. Again, in terms of where the teams are on the table, not really surprised that we're underdogs into this game, but we need a win here, because obviously when it comes to the Titans, any of the games that we've got left are not going to be any easier. Obviously, in terms of that, yes, the Titans obviously play Manly this coming week, then play the Dragons at Jubilee Oval the week after on the Sunday. Then play the Warriors at Seabus, play the Cowboys at Seabus on Thursday night. That's one of the only nights that isn't on a Saturday or a Sunday. Then Newcastle in Newcastle, then the Sharks at Seabus, the Rabbits at Seabus, and then finishing the season with the Dolphins at Seabus as well. So none of those teams realistically are going to be any easier, apart from even the Dragons. But even then, the Dragons have been playing relatively good football in the last month or so. So, all these games are going to be difficult, and trying to get out of that bottom 4 spot is going to be really, really tough. Again, I don't think we're making finals. That's probably apparent from everything, but in saying that, it's not like they haven't had effort to do so. It's just they've bottled a few games again. I guess this one kind of is as well, in the fact that they obviously held them for at least 10 minutes, in the fact that obviously it was like 15, 16 minutes left, and they held them to like a minute and a half left before Melbourne ended up scoring. Kind of say it's a bottle job. They could have went for the field goal as well, both teams, which is a bit of a surprise. I think that's what people were talking about. It's like in the lead up to possible situation where they could have had a field goal. Obviously, St. Harrison's obviously kicked one a couple of weeks ago against Penrith, and obviously Jaden Campbell could probably strike one as well. He's done that previously. Here's a situation where we could have just went for that, and the game would have been relatively different, obviously, in terms of the Storm obviously responding possibly with a field goal or trying to get a try to win the game. In general, it's one of those things where kind of you got to play, you got to game manage well enough, and I don't think that the Titans did that well enough. But also, again, the bunker needs to be looked at in terms of double movement calls, because the Titans get dudded out of decision again. And it just seems that a rule book is thrown at the Titans and said, look, this is the rule book, and when it comes to other teams, a rule book's been given to them and it's completely different. So I don't know what to say. I know it sounds like I'm bitter, but in saying that, Cowboys fans are even looking at it and being like, well, how did we get dudded from a double movement? And then the Melbourne game, which obviously from people, obviously they would have been neutral in that game, would have looked at that and be like, how was that not a double movement, but ours is? Like, how the fuck? And even neutral fans are like up in arms about it. And yeah, there's a few things over this week, obviously, in terms of obviously the Jack Bostock try, obviously the knock-on situation in terms of Origin 3, a few other calls obviously from the bunker, which some of them have been correct, which has been good, but there's been a few howlers over the weekend as well that have been like, what are we even doing? So 22 points to 18 loss for the Titans against the Storm. And swinging the other way, we go to the AFL, and obviously it was a big clash for the Giants up against the Geelong Cats. Obviously we had the nick over them in the last 4 games before that, obviously winning 4 in a row, and including 4 trips to the Cattery, where we've gotten 4 in a row down there. And it was a win. We ended up getting a win by 13 points, 86 to 73. 12 goals 14 to 11 goals 7. What I will say is that I think it was in the 20th minute of the third quarter we were down by 39 points against the Cats. So it ended up being a 52-point swing from 39 points down to 13 points in front. And it was crazy. This was a game that I was like, oh boy, we're not going to do well. Obviously, there was injuries in terms of the Cats. There was a few injuries in terms of that game, and there was obviously one for the Giants, which I'll get to eventually. But first quarter didn't look great. In fact, the first half wasn't ideal from the Giants. It was 5-2 for the Cats to 2-2, so it was in front by 18 points at quarter time, and they ended up scoring 2 goals, 5 behinds. The Cats compared to 1-4. So by halftime, I think they were up by like 30 odd points at that point in time. In fact, actually, let me have a look, because I did send a message to a friend while this game was going on. I'm going to have to scroll back a bit, because obviously I was keeping her up, because she's a Tigers supporter, so I was keeping up with the game there as well. But let me have a look. Keep scrolling back. 25 down at halftime. So they only increased their margin by 7 points at half from quarter time, so it wasn't crazy. Was down by 30, obviously, as I said, down by 32 at the point of the third quarter. Ended up scoring 3 goals straight, the Cats, compared to 2 goals and 4 behinds for the Giants. 27 was the margin at three-quarter time, and then the Giants ended up exploding in terms of scoring goals. In terms of the last 10 goals, it was 9 goals to the Giants compared to 1 for the Cats out of the last 10 goals scored in the game. So, in leading into, obviously, the margin, obviously, towards the end of the third quarter, and you even see it on the, if I could show you on the graph, towards the end of the third quarter, you can see that little, just before the big line, they start moving that back. So obviously the Giants end up scoring a couple of goals late in the third quarter to get that back to 27. Obviously keeping the margin out of it, but the Cats ended up only scoring 1 goal in the last quarter, with the defense holding very, very strong. A lot of momentum going against the Cats there, but it ended up being quite a lot. 7 goals, I think it ended up being. 7 goals, 4 behinds in the last, including some crucial, very, very crucial behinds, especially in the last minute or two, to get that in there, to get that 13-point win. Yeah, kicked 9 of the last 10 goals of the game. Prior to tonight, Cats held a record of 8-0 when leading at three-quarter time this season. And obviously that was obviously not the case. It's now 8-1. Big goal, obviously Finn Callahan ended up scoring the last goal of the game. Obviously there was a rush behind as well, which again, last few seconds I was like, that is a big behind. Obviously made that buffer to 13 rather than 12. Would have made, obviously the Cats kind of had to restrict themselves in that, but fantastic from the Giants. Obviously probably shouldn't have won that. The Cats kind of bottled it a little bit, but again, they were down on troops on the interchange bench. We'll say disposal efficiency, 69% for the Giants, 70% for the Cats. Goal efficiency, 22% for the Giants, 12 goals from 53 inside 50s compared to 18%, which was 11 goals from inside 60 inside 50s for the Cats. 16 free kicks to 13 in the favour of the Cats. Again, not really surprised. It's usually the Cats. A lot of the Melbourne teams seem to get that. Intercepts 74 to 71 in the favour of the Cats. Turnovers 71 to 74, obviously in the favour of the Giants. Obviously in terms of that. But again, I say that it should be in the favour of the Cats because obviously they got the less turnovers. They led for 116 minutes and 48 seconds during the game. We only led for 9 minutes and 48 seconds in the last. So when it comes down to it, they scored in the fourth quarter, late in the fourth quarter was their last goal. We obviously scored one very late. And obviously the times that obviously they show, it's including obviously times of stoppage. So obviously when there's any balls up, when there's throw-ins from the boundary line and stuff like that. Obviously, the biggest lead was 39 points. Ours is 13, obviously, which was the ending margin. In terms of that, 72 tackles in the favour of the Giants compared to 69%. So pretty well done. Obviously, interchanges made 57 out of 75 compared to 67 out of 75. But again, some of that was due to the fact that obviously there was players that were injured in terms of the Cats. We'll say that. We'll go with, obviously, in terms of goal scorers, top goal scorer was Callum Brown with 3 goals straight. Riley Hamilton, who ended up actually having to come in for Phoenix Goddard. He ended up going out with a shoulder dislocation injury. So he's out. I believe he's out this week, and hopefully he'll be back soon. But Riley Hamilton came straight into the side and absolutely did a great job. Ended up scoring 2 goals, 1. Toby Bedford ended up scoring 2 goals. Jake Stringer, 1 goal, 2. Aaron Cadman, 1 goal, 1. Finn Callaghan with a big goal towards the end of the game with 1 goal. Harry Himmelberg, huge heaving goal. Leading into that, obviously brought our margin down to, I think, single digits when his goal went through. Kieran Briggs ended up scoring a goal as well. Brought out the arrow for Jai Arrow as well in terms of celebration, which was great from him. Xavier Halloran ended up coming back for this game. He was back in, ended up scoring 2 behinds. Phoenix Goddard ended up scoring a behind himself. And Stephen Cornelio ended up scoring 1 behind as well. Toby Green actually didn't score at all, which is a bit of a surprise. 33 disposals from him though. Where are we? Claro, 36 disposals for him again, doing really well in terms of that. In terms of, if I can see the team's lineup, no. No, it doesn't say. Just trying to see. I'll just click on the match report instead. So when it comes down to injuries during the game, there was quite a few. Obviously, Phoenix Goddard with obviously the dislocation. Obviously, Jeremy Cameron for the Cats was the big one. He hurt his left collarbone. He was actually ended up on a wheelchair going out of the stadium and going straight to hospital. So I think he actually broke that, but I don't know if we've gotten that. But he was obviously taken to hospital with an injury. Tanner Bruin ended up getting an injury as well, and Jack Henry in this game. And they actually did have a late out as well before the game even started. So Mitch Nevitt come in for Mark O'Connor, and Patrick Dangerfield might have been playing with a sore left calf muscle. So Phoenix Goddard very early in the fourth quarter, left shoulder dislocation, so not ideal. But yeah, it's one of those things where there was a lot of injuries, and yes, they were down to, I think, 1 or 9 on the bench for the Cats, and obviously that probably led to some of the momentum. But I obviously was commenting with my friend, and someone was just so bitter on that and was like, oh yeah, it's like, winning and barely winning with like obviously one person on the bench for the Cats. I'm like, you do know how many injuries that the Giants have had pretty much all season, including a lot of their best players from their best 22. In fact, like I said, only 1 or 2 come back this game. Lockie Whitfield was out last, and it's like, oh yeah, it's difference between, obviously injuries during the season compared to injuries during the game. And I'm like, you do know that relatively one of the players that would have played this game was out last week because of a concussion. Otherwise, he would have been in for this game. But again, they just can't take it. And so with the Giants winning, that was great from them, and moves them up the table again, moves them to 11th position, so just outside of a wildcard spot. It's only outside by percentage at this point in time. We'll go over the table again. with a couple of big results over the weekend. Fremantle getting a win over the Sydney Swans, won by 38 points. In fact, they didn't actually score a single goal in the first half. They scored 11 behinds in the first half. So that means they scored 100 points in total in the second half, which was crazy to me. Collingwood just beat North Melbourne. They won by 4 points. They ended up scoring relatively late, and North Melbourne were ahead for a decent amount of this game, and just got done and just couldn't score any substantial scores through for goals late in the game. Port Adelaide got very close to St Kilda. St Kilda won by 14 points. Obviously, beat us by 1 point. They ended up winning 87-73. We won 86-73 in our game, obviously against the Cats. Carlton ended up losing for the first time, obviously since Josh Fraser took over as coach. They lost by 64 points. The Crows ended up winning at home by 79 points to the Suns. Suns only ended up scoring 49 points for the entire game. It was actually the lowest score. Apart from Carlton, it's the lowest score all weekend. Then Bulldogs won by 16 points over the Eagles. The Eagles led for a decent amount of this game as well. They just couldn't respond in the second half, especially in that last quarter. But yeah, the third quarter kind of let them down a little bit. They didn't score too many goals in the third quarter, especially the last quarter, and let them down a little bit. But obviously, the West Coast Eagles gave the Bulldogs a real decent scare. So props to them for obviously playing really good football. They've been playing some good footy over the last few weeks. They've just been dudded by some of the results. Again, not every single week in the last few weeks they've been great, but this game they definitely were. The D's ended up winning by 46 points over Richmond, 111-65. In that, obviously, was keeping my friend up to date with that game in particular. That margin did blow out to like 60 or 70 points at one stage there. Did roll back a bit, so obviously they took the foot off the gas a little bit. But the Tigers didn't do too badly. Was one of those things where they just, won by a decent chunk. And then Brisbane ended up winning by 90 points over Essendon. So in terms of percentage, for the bottom two sides, it's pretty close now. 3.6% between obviously the Richmond Tigers and Essendon at the bottom there. But Fremantle's still on top on 60 points. 2 games in front of the Sydney Swans, obviously with the Swans losing on Thursday night. They are still in second with 52 points. Hawthorn in third with 46 points. Obviously going down to Melbourne in Tassie, which obviously they would have made up a majority of those points and actually would have been out, half a game out of second position if they did win that game against the D's. But it is what it is. And then rounding out the top four on 44 points is the Brisbane Lions, obviously with a big percentage win over Essendon. Fifth position is the Adelaide Crows, also on 44 points, and then rounding out the top six is Melbourne, also on 44 points. Seventh position is the Western Bulldogs with 40, Collingwood in eighth position with 38, Geelong sliding right out of the top six, right into a wildcard spot last week, and have slid even more down to ninth position with 36 points. St Kilda jump into 10th position. They jump into that wildcard spot in 10th position with 32 points. And obviously the Giants also on 32 points with Carlton and North Melbourne behind them in 12th and 13th. The Giants obviously missing out of a wildcard spot by 4.5%, I think it is. Yeah, 4.5% compared to St Kilda, but hopefully we can pick that up this week. And we'll mention why in a second. Obviously Carlton dropping with a heavy loss, obviously big percentage loss there. North Melbourne obviously staying on 32. 14th position is the Gold Coast Suns on 28. Port Adelaide on 24. West Coast Eagles in 16th position with 16. 17th position is Richmond with 8. And obviously Essendon with 4 points still. 63% obviously to Richmond and 66.6% to Essendon. So obviously the percentage was a decent chunk in front. I think there were like 8% in front. I think Essendon at one stage there a couple of weeks back, but their defense has just fallen off a cliff. And they haven't been scoring that many points either. In fact, it was almost a scoreless quarter for Essendon in that game. I was keeping up with that. And Brisbane, they ended up scoring 3 points in the first quarter. So 3 behinds in that. And didn't score their first goal until very late in the second quarter. I think they ended up scoring 2 or 3 goals, I think, by half. So they ended up scoring a decent amount in the second half, but yeah, they got absolutely blitzed. So your Giants, very close to a wildcard spot, only out by percentage at this point. But obviously this game in particular, this week's game in particular, is very important for making into that top 10 position. Obviously, hopefully, Thursday night is one of those things where Geelong plays St Kilda. So hopefully, maybe Geelong can get a win and win against the Saints, because obviously we go down to Melbourne on, I believe it's Sunday? Yes, Sunday, in the late game, and we play Essendon at Marvel Stadium. So again, Marvel Stadium, not the greatest ground for us, and again, we did play Essendon earlier in the season and didn't win by that many points. This is a game where we need to get into a situation of making sure we have, obviously, the players on the field playing to their strengths, and we need to score a lot of goals. We need to score a lot of goals in this, score a lot of points, and concede not that many. We need to work, obviously, on our offense. Our defense probably needs to play a little bit better as well, because obviously we did concede by quite a lot in the first quarter, and usually we are relatively slow in the first quarter at least. But again, this is a game that is not necessarily a gimme, but this is one of those games where a percentage booster would really help the Giants to solidify a spot in the top 10 especially, because obviously we're behind by like 4 or 5% at this point compared to the Saints. Obviously the Saints will play Geelong Cats, but if we can get a big enough margin in front and get a big percentage off this game, even if the Saints win and we also win, that won't matter, because obviously our percentage will be a lot better than the Saints. Obviously if the Saints win close and we win by a heap of points, and obviously the percentage change, we could possibly go into that 10th position or higher, depending on other results, obviously, throughout the weekend. Gold Coast against the Western Bulldogs earlier in that day. Richmond versus Hawthorn. West Coast versus the Lions. Collingwood versus Carlton. That's going to be interesting. We'll see what that happens on Saturday night. North Melbourne versus Melbourne. Also another interesting game on Saturday. Port versus Fremantle at the Adelaide Oval. Going to be an interesting game there. And obviously Sydney versus the Adelaide Crows at the SCG. Yeah, that game's going to be very, in fact, most of the games this round coming is going to be very interesting to see. But obviously Essendon this coming week at Marvel, not our greatest in terms of location for games that we've played this year. It's one of those things where, can't do much about it, but it's one of those things where we just need to perform, and we need to play a lot better than we have the last few weeks. And especially in the first game against Essendon, we need to win by a lot more than that. We need to really hone this in. We need to build this for a percentage, and we need to win this game to get any chance of going into the top 10, because the game after that is Sydney Derby at NG Stadium, which I will be going to, and it's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough game. Ultimately, yes, they've got some players out. We've also got some players out, but at the same time, the last time we played them wasn't great. So we need to improve on that. Not necessarily strictly like it was last year at NG, if it's closer than that, in terms of obviously not being down by like 30 or 40 points at halftime and then roll it all the way back to absolutely rort them. we don't necessarily want that to happen. If it's close at halftime, I think it will be okay, but we need to perform a lot better in the next couple of weeks because obviously we got, in terms of the Giants, in the last few weeks, obviously we've got Essendon coming up on Sunday, then obviously the Saturday after is Sydney Swans, then we go to Adelaide Oval to play against Port Adelaide, then we go to Canberra to play the Suns. Then we'll be at home against the Eagles, though we haven't got a date for that yet, but I'm most likely attending that game as well. That is a weekend that falls on a weekend that I have off, so we'll work that out when we get to that. It should be in the next round or two when that game actually does get taken. The dates for that are official. And then obviously the week after that is at the Adelaide Oval against the Crows. So it's going to be very crucial to win some of these games coming up. Obviously Essendon is the big one. Sydney Swans, if we can knock them off, that'd be great. I have a feeling I'm doubting it, but obviously in saying that, in terms of recent form, that's what I'm doubting on. But again, the Giants have been playing relatively well, and they've slayed a few teams in the top, and especially in the top four, in terms of Brisbane, in terms of obviously Fremantle, and then obviously a team that was in the top four a few weeks ago, obviously in the Cats. So there's been some big scalps for the Giants this year, and obviously Hawthorn earlier in the year, and we almost beat Hawthorn again a couple of weeks back. So is one of those things. Obviously, Port Adelaide's in the round-out position. They're playing better than where their position is on the table. They've just been unlucky. But ultimately, down to the Adelaide Oval, they're a different beast altogether. That is a game that we should win. But again, it is Port Adelaide. It is a tough game down there in Adelaide. But we need to get a win there. Suns have obviously slipped down quite a bit. Obviously, Expansion Cup that week after. Going to Canberra as well, our last game in Canberra. Big game, because obviously then it's the Eagles at home at NG, and then obviously, as I said, Adelaide at the Adelaide Oval. And that game, if it goes down to that game in particular of finding out whether we're actually going to be in finals or not, is going to be really, really bad, because Adelaide will be right up for it. They're trying to get a top four spot, especially trying to get higher on the ladder if they can over the seasons, over the weeks leading into that. But obviously, if it goes down to the last round and they're looking for a top six clash compared to wildcard, and we're fighting for a wildcard spot or going out, and gets down to that game, it's going to be very, very hard. So we need to win as many games as possible over the next stretch to get over the hump and get into that spot. If we can get higher in terms of a wildcard spot, that'll be great. I'm not looking at it really well, because a lot of the teams in front of us are probably going to win more games as well. But as I said, compared to some of the games, like some of the teams like Carlton, like the Saints, North Melbourne, we need to win at least one or two more games than they do to get into a spot in the top 10. So we'll see what happens with that. Don't know what's going to happen, but hopefully we can end up getting some wins on the board. Essendon, obviously in Melbourne, is first. Then obviously it's the Sydney Derby. Then after that, we obviously go to Adelaide to play against Port Adelaide before the round of getting to the Gold Coast Suns with the Expansion Cup, the Eagles, and then obviously the Crows at the Adelaide Oval. So, be interesting, but 13-point win for the Giants over the Cats, and that makes it 5 in a row against the Cats in all competition, whether it's finals or in regular season. But 5 in a row, and obviously our record at the Cattery still stands, obviously at 4 in a row, in the fact that obviously this was played at NG Stadium. Would have been a great game to go to watch the second half, especially that last quarter. But again, probably not a great start, but it is what it is. But happy to get the win, and good to see that the Cats are sliding, because they're under a bit of pressure right now. Alright, first up in the miscellaneous segment, we're just going to talk about the Cubs. Obviously, they've just come off their series against the Baltimore Orioles at this point in time. It's Friday morning when I'm recording this. And they won the series 2-1, though in saying that, they did win the first 2 games and did lose very early this morning. So the first game for The series went to the Cubs 5-2. Pretty great game in general. There's a few things that obviously went around. Top of the third, Alex Bregman scored a single, which scored Miguel Amaya for 1-0 in the top of the third. Top of the fifth, PCA ended up hitting a single, which scored Dansby Swanson, made it 2-0. Then Alex Bregman grounded into a force out by the shortstop to the second baseman. So PCA was out at second, Miguel Amaya scored, and Alex Bregman ended up actually hitting first. There was a challenge on this because they thought that it was out at first. They thought it was a double play for a two out. And the top of the fifth, Cubs challenged, and it was overturned by manager's challenge, not ABS, because obviously it's a different system altogether. But that made it 3-0 with 1 out at that point in time. Obviously, we didn't get any more runs in that inning, which kind of sucks, but is what it is. Then Michael Bush got out on a sacrifice fly on the top of the seventh to score Miguel Amaya again. So that's Miguel Amaya ended up scoring at least 3 of the runs by actually running into home base, made it 4-0. Bottom of the seventh, they ended up scoring a single. There was a throwing error by Seiya Suzuki, which pushed 1 to third and 1 to second base off the single, and then it made it 4-2. And then Dansby Swanson ended up hitting a single to right field, and Nico ended up scoring to make it 5-2 in that game. And we did pretty well in terms of pitching. Matthew Boyd again did pretty well. All things considered in the game. Got 7 strikeouts for 6 innings, so actually not too bad. 3 hits, no runs. Obviously the 2 runs that come off in the game were from Ryan Rollinson. Again, I think we had at least 1 on base, I think, at that point in time during the game, so it kind of made sense that was going to happen, but ultimately wasn't a bad situation. We got out of it pretty unscathed. Second game was 9-7, much better in terms of the score rate, though, in saying that we did lead by quite a bit. Top of the third, PCA ended up hitting a homer to make it 1-0. Bottom of the third, they grounded into a double play, which did score, but we did get 2 outs out of it, but it tied the game at 1. Bottom of the fourth, Pete Alonso, obviously from Mets fame previously, obviously transferred and got traded to the Orioles. I think it was last year, I believe he moved there, if not at the start of this year. Hit a 2-run home run with Taylor Ward also scoring, make it 3-1 Orioles. Michael Conforto hit a homer to make it 3-2. Carson Kelly also joined in, hit a homer as well, made it 3-all, and then PCA, second home run of the game, made it 4-3 Cubs. So Cubs went from 3-1 down at the bottom of the fifth to the top of the fifth. Ended up leading 4-3. Alex Bregman got out on sacrifice fly with Carson Kelly scoring in the top of the seventh to make it 5-3. A wild pitch from the pitcher scored Dansby Swanson and moved everybody up a base. So PCA to third, Michael Bush to second to make it 6-3. And Seiya Suzuki came in, was like, why not? Why not join the party? Hit a home run, hit a 3-run home run to make it 9-3. Bottom of the seventh, Tyler O'Neill ended up hitting a homer, made it 9-4. Taylor Ward ended up hitting a single, which scored 1, which made it 9-5. Bottom of the eighth, Kobe Mayo ended up hitting a homer to make it 9-6, and Tyler O'Neill hit another homer to make it 9-7 at the end of it. So bullpen didn't do really great in the second half of that game. Realistically, one of those things. But in that game, obviously, PCA, with his first home run in the game, ended up reaching the 20-20 mark. So hit 20 home runs in the season and 20 stolen bases. So ultimately, there's players like, say, Shohei Ohtani did that last year. And obviously the year before when he was doing it as a designated hitter. And he did great in that. And obviously PCA has joined that class with that. So he's looking great on a heater and stealing bases. And yes, getting caught out sometimes, but not as often as some players do. And then obviously the last game, we're up obviously in the series, going for the sweep this morning, and then we lost 3-2 in the last game. Tyler O'Neill, the bottom of the second, hit a home run. Seiya Suzuki ended up hitting a homer in the top of the sixth to tie it at 1. Seiya ended up hitting a double in the top of the eighth to score PCA, made it 2-1. And then the bottom of the eighth, Jeremiah Jackson ended up hitting a double, which scored 1, and then Pete Alonso also scored on that because it went through centre field, but it hit the wall, and the ball got thrown to home base. Looked like it was out. They called it safe. Cubs obviously challenged through manager's challenge, and was confirmed that it was upheld. So it ended up being 3-2 to the Orioles, and obviously we did have at least a couple on base. Leading up to that, Tyler Ferguson actually was pitching previously to that. Actually hit both Alonso and Gunnar Henderson as well. So they ended up getting 2 on base because of those 2 hit pitches, and he actually got subbed out. And obviously coming in after him obviously was Ryan Rollinson, but I don't really put it on him. Obviously, yes, they scored a double off him, but we shouldn't have had 2 on base in the first place. So they ended up scoring the tying run and obviously the winning run. And then Kittredge, who used to obviously play for the Cubs, and got traded to the Orioles, I think a couple of years ago now. He ended up pitching for the last inning, and he did get obviously a couple on base. Nico ended up getting out on second base from a stolen base. That was also reviewed and was said that he was out, though I think that the defending player ended up actually blocking the base, which you're not supposed to do. So I thought that would have been interference from him, and ultimately got into a situation where Nico had to slide around because obviously his foot was near the line, the baseman. So obviously Nico had to change his line to get there. His mitt does go off the base, so if that's why he's out for that reason, okay. But in saying that, shouldn't really have your foot like right in front of the base in the line of where Nico was running, because that realistically that should be called interference. But again, 3-2 against the Orioles, not too bad. Obviously we go to Cincinnati tomorrow for a 3-game series. I think the last game is played during the Home Run Derby as well. So hopefully division rivals in that. I've obviously swept them so far in the season series at Wrigley Field. So hopefully we can do well against the Cincinnati Reds starting tomorrow. But 2-1 series win against the Orioles in Baltimore. Alright, we'll go to some miscellaneous stuff. Obviously, we did go through the round of 16, but we'll talk about the World Cup first, obviously, before we head into the series against the Reds for the Cubs, Cincinnati Reds, I should say. Obviously, division rival there. So we'll go back to the round of 16 anyway, just to go through some of the results, because I think we talked about some of them. I don't know if we talked about all of them. Obviously, in terms of the round of 16, we're scrolling right back. Obviously, Morocco ended up beating Canada 3-0. France beat Paraguay 1-0. Norway beat Brazil 2-1. 3-2 England over Mexico. 1-0 over Portugal for Spain. 4-1, obviously, Belgium over the USA. Funny, still love that England was complaining of the fact that Mexico played the majority of their games in Mexico City and in and around Mexico, and yet they ended up winning when the fact that they had to travel so much. 3-2, obviously Argentina over Egypt. The Swiss ended up beating Colombia in penalties to 3. Then we get to the quarterfinals. It was 2-0 win for France over Morocco. Mbappe, I think, ended up scoring again during that game in particular. It takes so long for this thing to load sometimes. Yes, he did. He ended up scoring the 60th minute. Dembele ended up scoring the 66th minute in that game. This was one of the games of the weekend, I thought, leading up. Spain versus Belgium. It ended up being 2-1 as well. So 2-1 to Spain. In fact, most of the clashes were pretty close. Spain scored in the 30th minute, Belgium scored in the 41st minute, and then Spain ended up scoring in the 88th minute. So they scored pretty late in the game, in particular to win it in regulation. England won 2-1 yesterday. In fact, both the two quarterfinals on the other side were played yesterday. It was a 3-1 win for Argentina over the Swiss. Both of them went to extra time. Jude Bellingham ended up scoring a double in that game, though in saying that Norway did score first in the 36th minute. Bellingham ended up scoring in the second minute stoppage time before halftime, so 45 minutes plus 2, and then in the 93rd minute, so pretty early in extra time, Norway got a goal disallowed in the first half, I believe, off one of their players from Erling Haaland ended up getting involved in a push, which, again, it's pretty soft. The defender just goes down like a sack of potatoes. Haaland doesn't even really push that hard. Like, his hand is up, yes, and again, if you're doing it in front of the referee and the referee catches it, I can understand what the call was, but the fact that this went to VAR and they said, oh, yeah, that's totally a foul. It's like, well, hang on a minute. We'll say in the Swiss game, there was a red card in that for simulation. That was a full-on dive. Like, holy shit, you even look at the Argentinian player's leg, it's nowhere near where this guy ends up. Like, I even watched it in motion. I seen it obviously in photos first, but I watched it in motion when obviously we had one of the news channels on during one of my breaks at work yesterday. Actually, my only break. They had it on the news, and oh my god, like, it's his dive like well in advance. Like, it's definitely like about this much in terms of like meters where the guy's dived. And obviously gets a yellow card for simulation, which ended up being his second yellow card of the game, which gave him a red card. But you can't really even say that it's like, oh, that's a call that completely goes in Argentina's favour. It's like, well, that is not a call that is like in the bag of Argentina. That is absolute bullshit in terms of saying that that's not a yellow card for simulation. Because holy shit, that was. Yeah, it was a pretty bad dive. We'll say Messi didn't score in the 3-1 win, but he did get an assist with Alexis McAllister, obviously of Liverpool fame, in the 10th minute. The Swiss scored in the 67th minute. That red card came in the 72nd minute, but it tied at 1-1 at full time. Normal time, went to extra time. They scored in the 112th minute, and the first minute stoppage time in the 120th minute, so the second stint of extra time for Argentina. So, yeah, England, there was controversy with that as well in terms of that game, with obviously that call on Haaland, scratching out a goal for Norway, and obviously in the lead up to one of the goals, I believe it was the first goal, for the game for England, does look like that the ball hits with one of the like Flying Fox Sky cams, hits one of the cables there and drops immediately down in possession in the favour of England, which is in the lead-up play to their eventual goal at half-time to be up 1-1, to be all square 1-1 at half-time. Yeah, pretty contentious calls. So it makes it very interesting in terms of the next couple of games, because on the 15th, on the Wednesday, so when this video goes up, this game will be done. France versus Spain. So this is literally, I think it's the two favourites of the tournament going into this game in Dallas at AT&T. And realistically, if you thought of a situation of like after the group stage was done, be like, oh, France and obviously Spain end up winning their group. It's like, well, it's going to be one of those two teams that are going to win, and they end up playing each other in the semi-final, which is going to be crazy in terms of that. So it's going to be probably one of the games of the tournament, I would think, in terms of defense and even offense for that. England versus Argentina in Atlanta. So that's at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, I believe. Yeah, Mercedes-Benz in Atlanta, obviously home of the Atlanta Falcons. But yeah, England playing against Argentina, that's going to be interesting as well. Obviously, those two, the two losers out of that play in playoff for third place. Miami on Sunday the 19th, so a couple of days after, and then Monday the 20th, the winner will play in the final. The winners of those two semi-finals will go and play in New York, which obviously I believe is at MetLife. It says New York, New Jersey Stadium, so I believe that's MetLife because that is where that is located. So, yeah, it'd be very interesting to see that. Few results obviously going against some teams there, but we'll go over to games against the Cubs and the Reds. 3-game series, obviously. Home run derby, I think, was also this today as well. Haven't caught up on that, so we'll see that. Overall, the MLB draft is going on right now as well, so I will mention, because this did come up in my news notifications for the Cubs. 23rd overall pick in the draft. We ended up picking Cade Townsend, right-handed pitcher from the University of Mississippi. Right-handed pitcher, probably possibly a reliever, but again, it could be a situation where he's just playing in the minor leagues for now. But obviously, playing in Cincinnati, 2-1 series win, obviously, against the Orioles before that, going into this series, and it ended up being a 2-1 series win for the Cubs as well. Though in saying that, we did lose the first game. We lost, no, sorry, that's the wrong way. We lost 4 runs to nothing, so we got shut out again. And we got shut out by the team that's in last in our division, which was even worse in terms of that. But obviously, Cincinnati ended up scoring, if I go through scoring, Ellie De La Cruz ended up scoring in the bottom of the 5th with a homer to make it 1-0. And the bottom of the 7th, there was a sacrifice fly which scored him. So he ended up getting on base in the bottom of the 7th to make it 2-0. And then there was a 2-run home run in the same inning, which is crazy because there was 2 outs with that sacrifice fly, that we ended up giving up a walk or a single, and it was JJ Bledday ended up hitting a 2-run homer in the bottom of the 7th to make it 4-0, and that's how the game ended. Yeah, we didn't do great in that game at all. Gave up too many runs. In the second game, it was 5 runs to 3. Very nervous in this game because the Reds were coming towards the end of that game with a lot of momentum, so it was very, very much under pressure. Speaking on that, Cincinnati ended up actually leading the game. Nathaniel Lowe ended up scoring a homer in the bottom of the 4th, and Suarez, Engino Suarez, I believe that's how that's pronounced, I'm not 100% sure. He also homered in the bottom of the 4th, which made it 2 runs to nothing in the bottom of the 4th. Top of the 5th, Seiya Suzuki ended up hitting a single, which scored Miguel Amaya and put PCA on 3rd. Fortunately, we didn't end up scoring any more off that. It was 2-1 Cubs. Top of the 6th, Carson Kelly ended up homering, which made it 2-all. Ian Happ hit a double, which scored Michael Bush, made it 3 runs to 2 in the favour of the Cubs. Bottom of the 6th, JJ Bledday ended up hitting a homer, which made it 3-all Cubs. 3-all for the Cubs and the Reds. Top of the 7th, Alex Bregman ended up hitting a homer, which scored Seiya Suzuki as well. 2-run home run in the top of the 7th, make it 5-3. Though in saying that, we did leave quite a few on base. In fact, the Reds ended up having 8 on base, including in that last inning as well. Compared to the Cubs left 7 on, but in terms of pitching, Assad ended up giving up 2 runs. Pomerantz came in after that. He ended up giving up a run as well. But But yeah, it's 2-run home run, obviously, for Assad. It's one of those things where just kind of under a bit of pressure, because we could have lost by a little bit more than that. And then this morning, very early this morning, we ended up winning 8 runs to 4, and definitely a much better result in terms of that. Much better performance from the Cubs. Top of the first, Alex Bregman hit a double, which scored PCA, ended up getting 1-0. Then Michael Bush hit a double, which scored Alex Bregman to make it 2-0 at the bottom of the third. At the top of the first. Bottom of the third, they ended up hitting a ground out. The Reds, which scored Ellie De La Cruz on 2 outs, make it 2-1. 2-1 to the Cubs. JJ Bledday ended up hitting a single, which scored one of their players, ended up being 2-2. And then Suarez hit a homer again, which scored JJ Bledday, which made it. So South Stewart must have been a designated runner, because the guy, the guy that hit the bat got out. Obviously, it was a single, which made it 4-2 to Reds at the bottom of the third. Sorry, just it didn't look like the person that got the ground out. I thought it was the same guy that was on the base for the second run, which kind of threw me out. Kelvin Alcantara ended up hitting a single in the top of the fourth, which scored Carson Kelly and Michael Bush, ended up hitting over to centre field. And Ian Happ went to third, so that tied the game at 4 runs apiece. Top of the seventh, PCA ended up hitting a single, which scored Dansby Swanson to make it 5-4. And then Alex Bregman just decided, you know what, I'm on a heater at the moment. I hit obviously a home run last game. I'm going to hit a home run again. Made it a 3-run home run, which made it 8 runs to 4. The top of the seventh, and they just didn't end up scoring again, the Reds. So with that, made it 2 games out of 3 against the Reds, which makes it 7-1 against the Reds. Is that right? Yeah, 6-1. 4, 5, 6. 6 games to 1. 6 wins to 1 compared to that in the season series. Sorry, my math was not working there. And with that, Milwaukee ended up losing 3 games to the Pittsburgh Pirates so far. So we're now moved 5 games back behind Milwaukee for the division. So we've actually done relatively well. Pittsburgh have jumped under 10 games behind in the division. They're now 9.5. And with Cardinals going down to the Braves today, they end up being 8.5 behind Milwaukee. So they're behind us by 3.5 games, even though they've won the majority of the games this season series against us. They're actually behind us by a decent chunk. And obviously Pittsburgh are behind them by 1 game there, and still in front of us by 1 game, by 1 win in the season series themselves, the Pirates. And obviously Cincinnati have just been absolutely blown out. And then obviously we're behind in the season series 4 games to 2 against Milwaukee so far. So in terms of the wildcard race, the Dodgers stay on top, 61-36. Milwaukee in second, 59-37. And Atlanta Braves, 55-40. Then obviously we're 2.5 games in to the wildcard spot in 4th position at 54-42. Philadelphia Phillies, half a game behind us. So they're 2 games in front in the wildcard spot in 5th position with 54-43. And the Miami Marlins are in the 6th position despite losing 3 games straight at the moment, 52-45. With St. Louis outside, 1 game behind, Pittsburgh Pirates behind by 2 games, and the Arizona Diamondbacks behind by 2.5, with a 4-win streak for them. So they've actually done pretty well. In fact, actually they've won a couple of games against some really good opponents in the last couple of weeks. I think even including the Dodgers, I believe, was one of those. Followed by San Diego. Washington have dropped off a little bit. They've lost a couple of games in a row. Cincinnati are there. And then the Giants, the Mets, and the Colorado Rockies. So ultimately, the Giants have switched positions again with the Mets. And obviously Colorado 13 in the games behind in the wildcard spot. In terms of the American League, Tampa Bay in front, 56 and 38. So the Dodgers in front of them, and Milwaukee's only just in front of them. They did lose today, Tampa Bay. So they would have almost been on the same as Milwaukee right now. Probably would have been ahead of them overall. White Sox in second, 50 and 45 on their record, and third position is the Texas Rangers, 49 and 47 with a win today, and a series win against the Astros for them this week. New York Yankees in fourth position, 6.5 games in, 4-game win streak for them. Fifth position, 54 and 42. 3.5 games in is the Cleveland Guardians. They're on a 4-win streak as well, 51 and 46. And rounding out the wildcard spots in terms of the American League, it is the Seattle Mariners with 48 and 49. Though the Twins are on the same record with 48 and 49. They're on the same amount of games as well. They're just outside. I think it's probably because Seattle ended up scoring more runs. In fact, they have 16 runs compared to 14 in the minus for the Minnesota Twins, and probably their home record and away record being in contention there as well. Then followed by the Boston Red Sox in 8th position, which is crazy considering they were near the bottom of that list. They've swung with quite a few games. They've won 9 in a row. That's crazy to see that. In fact, actually, it's going to be one of the best records. It's the best record in terms of win rate right now, but in terms of that, it's obviously one of the biggest ones of the season for any team in either leagues. Behind them is the Houston Astros, then the Baltimore Orioles in that 10th position, then Toronto Blue Jays, then the Detroit Lions. Sorry, not Detroit Tigers. I'm thinking NFL. Detroit Tigers. Then the Athletics, they've dropped off. They've lost 9 in a row, so they've completely dropped. Kansas City Royals, and then the LA Angels are behind them. But again, those two teams on the same amount. They're 10 games behind in the wild card race at the moment. One's lost 5 in a row, the other one's lost 2. And in fact, the Angels have lost 2 in a row. And it's pretty crazy because, same record again, and the Angels have a possibility of getting off the bottom if they can win sooner than, obviously, the Royals. But, Chicago Cubs looking good. Obviously, we're in the All-Star game break right now. In terms of the games that we don't have another game until this Saturday coming, which is against the Minnesota Twins, believe it or not. We're playing at Wrigley Field against the Twins on July the 18th, right through to the 20th. Then we play the Detroit Tigers at home as well before a break, and then playing in Pittsburgh for 3 games, then playing 4 games in St. Louis against the Cardinals. So that's going to be a big series, and obviously the games against Pittsburgh are going to be big as well, because after that, going into August, is the Yankees and the Dodgers, and then obviously that makeup game for the Blue Jays is after that. Then we go to Kansas City to play against the Royals before the break on the 11th of August. So that's going to be the biggest break between the 25th of July to the 10th of August. There's going to be a big lot of games right there. Obviously, the Toronto game would have been a break, but obviously considering we had to make up that game, that's where that game lies. Then Washington in Washington, then St. Louis at home, then the White Sox at Wrigley Field again before a break on the 21st of August, then the Seattle Mariners in Seattle, then Arizona in Arizona, followed by a break on the 28th, and then playing at home against Cincinnati, then 4 games in September against Milwaukee before 3 games in Miami against the Marlins, then 3 games in Milwaukee before the break on September the 11th. So there's still quite a lot of games left. Pittsburgh after that on the 12th of September for 3 games at home. Atlanta Braves at home. Then Cincinnati Reds at Cincinnati. Then Miami at home. And then obviously finishing off with the Boston Red Sox in Boston. So we finish in Fenway Park on the 26th to 27th and 28th of September. So lots of games still left to go. Quite a few teams in and around the mix. Really good teams coming up as well. Obviously, start of August. It's the Yankees and the Dodgers back to back. So that's going to be pretty crazy. Thankfully, yes, it is at Wrigley Field. So that's probably one reason why we're able to play them back to back. But holy shit, that group of games coming up is going to be crazy, especially after playing in Pittsburgh and playing in St. Louis against division rivals. That's going to be huge. But we'll see what happens. Obviously, we're going to start with the Twins, and obviously after the All-Star break, and then obviously go to play at home against Detroit as well before playing in Pittsburgh. So, yeah, doing pretty well, obviously, with the Cubs. 2-1 series win over the Reds, followed by, obviously, a 2-1 series win over the Orioles as well. Leading in the All-Star break, the only person that obviously will be in that All-Star game as a reserve that will be there is PCA. The rest of the guys will have a decent couple of days break just to rest up. Hopefully we can get some pitchers back in the lead up to that Minnesota Twins series, if not leading into the series against Pittsburgh the week after on the 25th of July. So we'll see what happens with that, but ultimately not doing too bad with the Cubs. Obviously their record in terms of winning in the last few games has actually been MLB's best compared to a lot of the other teams, but obviously the Boston Red Sox are doing pretty well as well in their own regard, but hopefully we can just keep momentum rolling and get quite a few wins. If we can get a few sweeps in some of these series coming up, obviously against the Minnesota Twins, against Detroit, maybe, if we can get some of those to be sweeps, that'll be great. It'll be better, obviously, for our win-loss record as well, especially if Milwaukee end up dropping quite a few games as well. Make that division spot at the top very, very enticing and make it very interesting if it goes back to like 2 or 3 games left to go with a few weeks left, because the pressure will be on Milwaukee to try and perform and play better. But with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching this long episode of How's My Team. I apologise again. A lot of rambling, a lot this week. Quite a few calls. Obviously, they've went against some of my teams this week. Lots to talk about. But with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of How's My Team. This has been my Man 100. You guys have a great day night, and of course, take care.